This isn't just about a spice. It's about the tiny, fiery grain that once held the power to raise armies, fund kingdoms, and rewrite the very map of the world. For millennia, pepper wasn't merely a seasoning. It was a currency, a motive for brutal conquest, and the driving force behind an economic engine that fueled entire empires, from Rome to the Dutch East India Company. This innocuous speck, now so common we barely notice it, was once called black gold, and men literally died to control its journey from a tropical vine to the tables of the powerful. Our story begins in the sweltering, monsoon-drenched hills of the Malabar coast, in what is now the state of Kerala, India. Here, the Piper nigrum vine, a graceful climber with dense clusters of berries, has flourished for thousands of years. Early inhabitants discovered its pungent, warming properties, using it not only in food, but also in traditional medicine and religious rituals. From these humid origins, pepper's allure began to spread, inching its way along ancient land and sea routes that would become known as the spice roads. By 1000 BCE, evidence suggests pepper was already traded with the Middle East, reaching Egypt, where traces of peppercorns were famously found stuffed into the nostrils of Ramesses II, an indicator of its perceived value, even in the afterlife. But it was the Roman Empire that truly elevated pepper from a regional curiosity to a global commodity. As Rome expanded its reach, so too did its appetite for exotic goods. By the 1st century BCE, vast quantities of pepper were arriving in Alexandria, Egypt, then traveling up the Nile, across the desert, and eventually by ship to Rome. Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist, famously lamented in his Natural History the exorbitant cost of pepper, complaining that Rome was draining its treasury to pay for these luxuries from India. He observed that there is no year in which India does not drain the Roman Empire of at least 50 million sesterces. This wasn't merely a cultural preference, it was an economic hemorrhaging, driven by a pervasive demand for this small, dark berry. Roman cooks cherished its ability to transform bland dishes, and its perceived medicinal properties only increased its mystique. The Roman love affair with pepper was so profound that when Alaric the Goth besieged Rome in 410 CE, he demanded not only gold and silver as ransom, but also 3,000 pounds of pepper. This demand alone speaks volumes about its undeniable status as a high-value asset, a non-negotiable component of wealth and power, even in the empire's twilight. With the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the sophisticated trade networks that had brought pepper to Europe largely fragmented. The flow of goods from the East slowed to a trickle, making pepper an even rarer and more coveted commodity. Europe descended into what some historians term the Dark Ages, but the desire for exotic spices, particularly pepper, never truly vanished. Instead, it became a symbol of status and wealth, hoarded by kings and nobles, used as currency, and reserved for the most lavish feasts. Access to pepper became a marker of power, a tangible sign of connection to a world beyond the local manor. As Europe began to emerge from this period, trade slowly revived, spearheaded by ambitious Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa. These maritime republics became the crucial intermediaries in the resurrected spice trade. They didn't sail to India themselves, but rather negotiated with Arab traders who controlled the overland routes from the east, especially through Egypt and the Levant. The caravans, laden with pepper and other precious spices, made their arduous journeys to ports like Alexandria, Beirut, and Aleppo, where they were then loaded onto Venetian and Genoese galleys bound for Europe. This system, while effective, created immense profits for the Arab middlemen and, crucially, for the Italian merchants who held a virtual monopoly on distribution to the rest of the continent. Every peppercorn that reached a European table had passed through multiple hands, each adding a substantial markup, making it incredibly expensive. Pepper was literally worth its weight in gold, or very close to it. It was used to pay taxes, as dowries, and even to pay rent. A tenant might owe a few peppercorns for the use of land, signifying its enduring value as a unit of wealth. The insatiable demand for pepper and the immense profits reaped by Venice and Genoa began to ignite a fierce ambition in other European powers. Imagine a world where a single ingredient in your kitchen could decide the fate of nations, where controlling access to it meant unimaginable wealth and political dominance. This was the reality of pepper in the 14th and 15th centuries. The desire to bypass the Venetian and Arab stranglehold to find a direct sea route to the source of these precious spices became an obsession, a driving force behind what would become the Age of Exploration. This wasn't just about economic gain, it was about national pride, strategic advantage, and the thrilling prospect of unlocking new worlds. This was the reality of pepper in the 14th and 15th centuries. The desire to bypass the Venetian and Arab stranglehold to find a direct sea route to the source of these precious spices became an obsession, a driving force behind what would become the Age of Exploration. This wasn't just about economic gain, it was about national pride, strategic advantage, and the thrilling prospect of unlocking new worlds. It set the stage for some of humanity's most daring and often brutal adventures. If you find this hidden history of everyday ingredients as captivating as we do and want to uncover more stories of how food shaped our world, consider subscribing to Breaking Bread. We delve deep into the origins of what's on your plate, revealing the empires built and lives lost, all for a taste. The turn in history, the moment when pepper transformed from a costly luxury into a catalyst for global transformation, truly began with Portugal. Portugal, a small nation on the edge of the known world, felt acutely the sting of the Venetian monopoly. Its monarchs and merchants yearned for a direct route to the fabled Spice Islands and the Malabar coast. This yearning birthed the era of Prince Henry the Navigator, who, though he never sailed the open ocean himself, poured royal resources into developing navigation techniques, shipbuilding, and cartography. His vision was clear: circumnavigate Africa, bypass the Ottoman Empire and the Arab traders, and reach India directly. The stakes were monumental, the risks unimaginable. Shipwreck, disease, starvation, and hostile encounters with unknown peoples were constant threats. Thousands of lives would be lost in this audacious quest. It was Vasco da Gama in 1497 who finally achieved this seemingly impossible feat. After a grueling voyage of over 11 months, rounding the Cape of Good Hope, battling storms, and navigating treacherous coastlines, his small fleet finally dropped anchor in Calicut, on the very Malabar coast where pepper had originated. Imagine the scene: a Portuguese sailor, far from home, stepping onto Indian soil not for gold or glory alone, but for a handful of peppercorns. His goal was not just to trade, it was to establish a permanent presence, to secure a direct, unbroken supply chain. The local ruler, the Zamarin of Calicut, was underwhelmed by the trinkets da Gama offered as gifts, accustomed as he was to the far richer wares of Arab merchants. But da Gama wasn't there to impress with baubles, he was there to disrupt a millennia-old trade system. He returned to Lisbon in 1499, his ships laden with pepper, cinnamon, and other spices, despite immense losses of men and ships. The remaining cargo, however, was so valuable it paid for the entire expedition 60 times over. Portugal had found its black gold. The immediate consequence was an explosion of Portuguese imperial ambition. They swiftly realized that merely trading was not enough. To truly control the pepper flow and reap maximum profit, they needed to dominate the source. This led to an era of brutal military expansion. Alfonso de Albuquerque, a shrewd and ruthless strategist, became the architect of Portugal's Estado da India, or State of India. From 1509 onwards, he systematically seized strategic strongholds: Goa in 1510, Malacca in 1511, and Hormuz in 1515. These were not random conquests, they were vital choke points in the existing spice trade routes, effectively giving Portugal control over the maritime highways of the East. Lisbon became the new hub for the European spice trade, bypassing Venice entirely. The Portuguese enforced their monopoly with extreme prejudice. Any ship caught in the Indian Ocean without a Portuguese carta or license was considered a pirate and subject to seizure or destruction. They bombarded coastal cities, massacred populations who resisted, and enslaved those who survived. For the first time, a European power had projected its might across vast oceans, all driven by the desire to control the humble pepper vine and its lucrative yield. This wasn't just trade, it was an empire built on the back of a spice, maintained through fear and overwhelming naval power. The Malabar coast, the ancient home of pepper, became a battleground. Its people caught between the demands of the Portuguese and their traditional trading partners. The human cost of this sudden shift in global power was immense, a trail of blood and subjugation stretching from the shores of India to the palaces of Lisbon. But Portugal's monopoly, though formidable, was not destined to last. Other European nations, observing Portugal's immense wealth, began to cast envious eyes eastward. The late 16th and early 17th centuries saw the rise of two new formidable players, the Dutch and the English. These were not just nation-states, but revolutionary commercial entities. The Dutch East India Company, Verenigde Oost-Indische Company, or VOC, and the English East India Company. The VOC, founded in 1602, was particularly groundbreaking. It was the world's first truly multinational corporation, empowered by its government to wage war, sign treaties, coin money, and establish colonies. With unprecedented capital raised from public share offerings, the VOC quickly became the richest company in history, effectively functioning as a state unto itself. Its primary objective, to break the Portuguese monopoly and secure its own control over the spice trade, with pepper remaining a central target. The ensuing struggle was fierce and bloody. The Dutch, with superior ships, financial backing, and a relentless commercial drive, systematically dismantled the Portuguese network. They captured Portuguese strongholds like Malacca in 1641 and pushed them out of Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and significant parts of India. Their strategy was not merely to trade, but to establish outright control over production areas. They seized and defended pepper-growing regions, often forcing local rulers into exclusive contracts that effectively turned independent farmers into Dutch vassals. The Dutch focus was particularly intense on the smaller, rarer spices like nutmeg and mace from the Banda Islands, leading to infamous massacres to secure their monopoly there. But pepper, being more widely grown, demanded a different approach: control through volume and strategic alliances. The Dutch built a vast network of trading posts, fortifications, and plantations, fundamentally altering the economic and political landscape of Southeast Asia and India. Their power was unparalleled and their methods often brutal, all in the service of profit from the spice trade. The English East India Company, EIC, though a formidable force in its own right, found itself initially outmaneuvered by the Dutch in the race for the most valuable spice territories. The Dutch secured the monopoly on nutmeg and mace and largely controlled cinnamon. However, pepper, being a more dispersed crop, offered opportunities for the EIC.
They focused on establishing trading factories in various parts of India, including areas on the Malabar coast and Sumatra. The competition between the Dutch and English was intense, often spilling into open conflict. Naval battles were fought, trading posts were raided, and diplomatic maneuvers were ceaseless, all aimed at gaining an advantage in the lucrative spice trade. While the English never achieved the same level of total market dominance over pepper as the Dutch did with some other spices, they carved out a significant share, establishing a powerful presence that would eventually form the bedrock of the British Empire in India. The seeds of colonial rivalry and global conflict were sown, watered by the demand for spices. If you're fascinated by the raw ambition and cutthroat competition that this humble grain inspired, share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think it says about humanity that such a small thing could ignite such monumental struggles for power? As the 18th century dawned, a new, independent player emerged on the global stage, the young United States of America. Freed from British mercantile restrictions, American merchants, particularly from Salem, Massachusetts, were eager to forge their own trade routes, free from the entanglements of European colonial powers. Their target, the direct acquisition of pepper from Sumatra. European powers had largely overlooked Sumatra's potential for large-scale pepper cultivation, focusing instead on Java and other islands. But American captains, driven by entrepreneurial spirit, sailed directly to this wild, largely uncolonized island, bypassing the established trading companies altogether. Captain Jonathan Carnes of Salem was a pioneer of this direct trade. In 1795, he returned from Sumatra with a full cargo of pepper, having acquired it at a fraction of the cost in European markets. The profits were astronomical. This sparked a pepper fever in Salem. Soon, dozens of American ships, swift and lightly armed, were making the perilous journey to Sumatra. They engaged in direct barter with local chiefs, exchanging American manufactures like cloth and tools for vast quantities of pepper. This direct trade was highly profitable, but incredibly dangerous. Sumatran ports were often lawless, and local pirates, or chiefs eager for a larger share of the profits, frequently attacked American vessels. The most famous incident occurred in 1831, when the American ship Friendship was plundered and its crew massacred at Kuala Batu, a pepper port on Sumatra. The response from the United States government was swift and decisive. President Andrew Jackson dispatched the USS Potomac, a 44-gun frigate, to Sumatra to exact retribution. The Potomac bombarded the village, killing hundreds, a clear message that American commercial interests, even in distant pepper ports, would be protected with military force. This episode underscores how deeply entrenched pepper trade had become in American foreign policy, highlighting its continuing economic significance even as its global scarcity began to wane. The American quest for pepper wasn't about building an empire in the same vein as the Portuguese or Dutch, but it demonstrated the enduring power of this spice to draw nations into conflict and shape their international posture. Beneath the grand narratives of empires and discovery, however, lay the immense human cost. The history of pepper, like that of many other high-value commodities, is stained with exploitation, violence, and unimaginable suffering. For the local populations of the Malabar Coast, Sumatra, and other pepper-growing regions, the arrival of European traders rarely meant prosperity or partnership. Instead, it brought war, disease, and subjugation. Indigenous farmers were often coerced or forced into cultivating pepper for the benefit of distant European markets.
Slavery played a significant role, particularly in the early stages of spice cultivation and transportation. On plantations established by the Portuguese and later the Dutch, enslaved laborers were forced to toil under brutal conditions, cultivating and processing pepper. The perilous sea voyages themselves claimed countless lives, not just of European sailors succumbing to scurvy and tropical diseases, but also of enslaved people trafficked across oceans. The establishment of monopolies by force, as practiced by the Portuguese and Dutch, led to massacres and the brutal suppression of any resistance. Local rulers who defied European demands often faced the full might of their navies and armies, leading to widespread destruction and loss of life. The story of pepper is not just about exotic flavors and immense wealth. It's also about the fundamental injustice and violence inherent in a system where one group's luxury is built upon the suffering of another. It reminds us that every sprinkle of spice carries with it a faint echo of human struggle and sacrifice. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the age of pepper as black gold, a commodity capable of founding and felling empires, began to wane. Several factors contributed to its diminished, though still significant, economic power. Firstly, increased cultivation outside of its original Malabar home, particularly in regions like Sumatra, Java, and eventually Vietnam, broke the effective monopolies held by European trading companies. As more pepper entered the global market, its scarcity, and therefore its price, naturally decreased.
The ability of any single nation or company to control the supply diminished significantly. Secondly, advancements in transportation and communication technology made global trade more efficient and less risky. Larger, faster sailing ships, and later steamships, reduced transit times and the costs associated with long voyages. The perils that made pepper so expensive in the past, shipwreck, piracy, disease, were gradually mitigated. This logistical efficiency further contributed to the decline in pepper's price. While still a valuable agricultural product, it lost its exceptional status as a kingmaker, a unique treasure that could dictate national policies. The immense profit margins that once funded entire imperial projects became smaller, more aligned with other agricultural commodities. It transitioned from a strategic weapon in global power plays to a widely available ingredient. So, what exactly is this grain that stirred such monumental conflicts? Pepper, specifically black pepper, comes from the dried, unripe fruit of the Piper nigrum plant, a flowering vine in the family Pepperhistory. It's native to Kerala in the Western Ghats region of India. The small, round fruits, called peppercorns, are typically picked when green, then sun-dried, which causes them to wrinkle and turn black. This drying process also concentrates the volatile oils and piperine, the chemical compound responsible for pepper's characteristic pungent heat. The different colors of pepper we encounter, black, white, and green, all originate from the same plant. Black peppercorns are the dried, unripe fruit. Green peppercorns are simply the unripe berries, either freeze-dried or preserved in brine, maintaining their fresh, milder flavor. White peppercorns, however, undergo a different process. The ripe red berries are soaked in water, allowing their outer layer, the pericarp, to soften and be removed, revealing the pale inner seed. This results in a milder, less complex flavor, often preferred in lighter sauces where black flecks would be undesirable. Understanding this botanical reality reveals the simplicity of the plant itself, contrasting sharply with the complex human history it inspired. Pepper's journey from a rare, precious commodity to a kitchen staple fundamentally reshaped global culinary practices.
For centuries, its primary roles in Europe were often utilitarian, masking the flavor of spoiled meat before refrigeration or acting as a preservative. It was a sign of wealth to use pepper lavishly, a way to demonstrate one's status. But as it became more accessible, its role transformed. Chefs and home cooks alike began to appreciate its nuanced flavor, the sharp, pungent bite of piperine, the subtle citrusy notes, and the earthy aroma. Pepper transitioned from being a mere status symbol or a necessity for preservation to an indispensable flavor enhancer. It became a cornerstone of countless cuisines worldwide, not just European. From the vibrant curries of India to the robust stews of France, the delicate stir-fries of China, and the grilled meats of the Americas, pepper found its place. It offered a versatile depth, a fundamental balancing element that could lift flavors, add warmth, and provide a subtle kick without overpowering other ingredients. It helped usher in a culinary revolution where spices were no longer just exotic imports, but essential tools for gastronomic artistry. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine a savory dish that doesn't benefit from a dash of freshly ground black pepper. Its ubiquity is a testament to its enduring culinary appeal, far beyond its historical economic value. Today, the global pepper trade is a vast and complex network, but thankfully far removed from the imperial conquests and violent monopolies of centuries past. Vietnam has emerged as the world's largest producer and exporter of pepper, accounting for a significant portion of the global supply. Other major producers include India, Brazil, Indonesia, and Malaysia. While still a valuable agricultural commodity, pepper prices fluctuate based on harvests, weather patterns, and global demand, much like any other crop. The modern trade faces new challenges and considerations. Sustainability and ethical sourcing are growing concerns. Consumers and businesses increasingly seek fair trade certified pepper, ensuring that farmers receive fair compensation and that environmentally sound practices are employed.
The romanticized image of explorers seeking exotic spices has been replaced by the very real issues of climate change impacting yields, labor conditions in growing regions, and the economics of global agriculture. Despite its transformation into a common household item, pepper remains a vital crop for millions of farmers, particularly in developing nations, making its journey from farm to table still a matter of global importance, though with a different set of stakes. The history of pepper is a profound testament to how seemingly small desires can ignite monumental change. This humble grain, grown on a simple vine in India, didn't just add flavor to food. It reshaped continents, launched navies, funded global corporations, and drove the relentless pursuit of wealth that defined the age of exploration and the dawn of colonialism. It reveals a deep truth about human nature, our insatiable appetite for discovery, for luxury, and for control. From the Roman demand that drained treasuries to the Portuguese and Dutch empires built on brutal monopolies, and the American adventurers who risked everything for a direct supply, pepper was the silent protagonist of a dramatic global saga. Every time you reach for the pepper shaker, you're not just adding a dash of flavor. You're touching a direct link to a history filled with daring voyages, bloody conflicts, and unimaginable fortunes. You're holding the residue of empires, the echoes of countless lives, and the very force that propelled humanity to conquer oceans and redefine its place in the world. This tiny grain reminds us that the mundane objects in our lives often carry the weight of extraordinary, forgotten histories, shaping the world we inhabit in ways we rarely consider. And in that simple sprinkle, there's a universe of stories waiting to be rediscovered.